In the second video of this chapter, we are going to learn about kinds of chemical reactions. Chemical changes occur during chemical reactions. There are several different kinds of chemical reactions. A special kind of sentence called a chemical equation shows what happens during a chemical reaction. This sentence uses symbols instead of words, and these are the parts of a chemical reaction. The reactants are the substances used in reaction and are on the left side of the chemical equation. The products are the substances made during the reaction and found on the right side of the chemical equation. Here are some examples. Here are some examples of chemical equations. On the left side are the reactants. Here we have two different elements combining to form a compound. Here, in this chemical equation, we have a compound that reacts. The arrow shows the reaction. That reacts to form two separate elements. So these are two different kinds of chemical equations or chemical reactions, and you are going to learn the names of these kinds of chemical reactions later in this video. Matter is always conserved. This is important for you to remember. Matter cannot be created or destroyed during a chemical reaction. This statement is called the law of conservation of mass. It means that the total mass of the reactants equals the total mass of the products. If you bake a cake, for instance, the mass of the ingredients equals the mass of the cake plus the mass of the water vapor, carbon dioxide, and other trace gases that float from the oven, making the cake smell so good. So no matter what, matter is not created or destroyed during a chemical reaction. Here we're going to get more specific and talk about the types of chemical reactions. It's sometimes easier to understand chemical reactions if you use a model. A model is something that stands for a real thing. We can use models to learn something about real things. We can use trucks and trailers as models of atoms and reactions. We are going to talk about the three kinds of chemical reactions. The first is a decomposition reaction. This is where compounds split apart to form smaller compounds or elements. To picture a decomposition reaction, think of a truck unhitching from the trailer. You can see that you start with one whole thing, the reaction happens, you can tell the reaction happens by the arrow, and you have two separate elements. So you start with one whole and you end up with two different parts. Another way to think about it is you start with a compound word like paperclip, and the reaction happens and you get paper plus clip. So from before, you saw that you had two water atoms, hydrogen and oxygen, combined in a compound, and the reaction happens and you end up with two different elements. This is the decomposition reaction, breaking up into parts. In another kind of reaction, elements or compounds come together to form new compounds. This is called a combination reaction. To picture this combination reaction, think of a truck separated from its trailer, and they come together. The reaction happens and they come together to reconnect. Another example when this reaction occurs is when iron and sulfur come together to form a compound called iron sulfide. Here's the chemical equation. Another way to think about a combination reaction is to think of a compound word that's separated already. Bath plus room equals bathroom. Here you can picture the combination reaction by picturing hydrogen molecules and oxygen molecules combining to form water. In a third kind of reaction, at least one molecule splits apart. The parts of the molecule switch places just as two trucks can switch trailers. This kind of reaction is known as a replacement reaction. One example of a replacement reaction is the burning of a candle. Some candle waxes are long molecules of carbon and hydrogen atoms. Remember that oxygen gas is a molecule made of two oxygen atoms. When wax burns, the long molecules and oxygen molecules break apart and rejoin in new compounds such as carbon dioxide and water. Here you can see in the picture you have a gentleman and you have a couple. The reaction happens and the couple switches places. We have a single gentleman with now a couple. Another example, if you want to think about it in words, is television screen and plus a doorknob. Reaction happens, they switch places, you get a television knob and screen door. Here's an example of a chemical equation that is a replacement reaction. Please fill out your notes page as completely as possible and correctly as possible.